cut off toes, a dropped coffin, and poked out eyes? Believe it or not, but these are the real versions of your favorite Disney fairy tales, and they were my bedtime stories growing up in Germany. Hallo, Servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Felicia. I'm originally from Munich, Germany, but I've been living in Cincinnati, Ohio, off and on since 2016. So as you guys know, these last few weeks have been a turbulent time in the US with all of the protests and riots and violence happening. And like many of you too, probably, I was really overwhelmed by everything, and I tried to educate myself and I watched the news pretty much 24/7. And I didn't really feel like it was a good time to upload a new video, but I think having something entertaining to get some distraction every now and then is important too. So here I am with a new video, and today I'll talk about a topic I've been wanting to cover for a while now, and that is fairy tales. So most of you probably know these classical Disney movies like Cinderella, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, or Sleeping Beauty, and as many of you probably also know, those fairy tales weren't actually written by Disney. In fact, a lot of them are based on old German fairy tales, specifically from the fairy tale collection by the brothers Grimm. Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm were two academics from Steinau in Germany, and they're known for collecting and writing down folk tales with different origins, and they published their collections in different books in the early 1800s, so about 200 years ago. A lot of those fairy tales are very popular to this day, and as I said, even Walt Disney based a few of their movies on these fairy tales, but what many people don't know is that they changed them quite a bit to make them more family-friendly and harmless, because the original stories actually have some pretty cruel parts in them. And I feel like this may shock some American parents watching this, but as a kid growing up in Germany, I actually grew up with the original cruel versions by the brothers Grimm way before I ever saw the Disney movies. My mom would just read them to me as bedtime stories. And no, my parents weren't bad parents or anything like that. Those fairy tales are just considered an important part of German culture and literature. And I'm actually curious to see how many of my German viewers grew up with the originals too. So if you're German, let me know in the comments if you grew up with the Grimm versions or the Disney versions of the fairy tales. Or if you're a parent yourself, do you read those stories to your kids too? But yeah, I definitely did grow up with them, and I do remember the storylines really well to this day. So today I'll give you a little glimpse into my childhood and tell you about the real versions and especially the cruel parts of 5 Disney fairy tales that all of you know. The first one is Cinderella, or Aschenputtel, which is what the German version is called. The Disney version is from 1950 and is one of Disney's most popular movies, so most of you have probably seen it at least once in your life. The main story stays the same in both versions. Cinderella, or Aschenputtel, is a beautiful girl who lives with her stepmother and 2 stepsisters who don't like her and who make her work as a maid in her own home. Then the king hosts a ball to find a bride for his son, and while the stepsisters are obviously going to go to that, they're trying to prevent Cinderella from going. But without their knowledge, she manages to go anyway, meets the prince who falls in love with her, but she runs away from him and loses one of her slippers. So then the prince searches for the anonymous girl by having all girls in the kingdom try on the slipper and see who it belongs to. While the stepmother hides Cinderella, her 2 daughters try the shoe on unsuccessfully, and in the end, Cinderella gets to try it on and her and the prince get married. Okay, now there are a lot of minor differences between the Disney version and the Grimm version. Like in the Disney version, Cinderella is an orphan, while in the original, her father is actually still alive, which makes it even worse because this means that he doesn't protect his own daughter from being mistreated by his new wife and her daughters. Also, in the Grimm version, the ball lasts 3 nights and Cinderella spends time with the prince on all of those nights, while it's just 1 night in the Disney version. And in the original, the stepsisters are trying to prevent Cinderella from going by throwing lentils into ashes and tell her she can't go until she has picked all of them out, while in the Disney version, they destroy her dress. Now let's get to the major differences. In the cartoon version, the reason that Cinderella manages to go to the ball after all is because her fairy godmother shows up and magically gives her a carriage, staff, and a beautiful ball dress, but the spell will break at midnight and those things will disappear, which is the reason she runs away from the prince. In the Grimm version, it's not fairy godmother who helps Cinderella, but instead she has a lot of help from birds who help her picking out the lentils. And there's a magical tree that she planted herself on her mother's grave, and the birds who sit on it throw down things that she wishes for, so she goes to the tree and wishes for a ball dress. She goes to the ball, her stepsisters don't recognize her, and when she wants to leave and the prince wants to accompany her, she runs away from him because she doesn't want him to know who she is and what family she belongs to. The same thing happens on the second night, but on the third night the prince has the steps covered in pitch, so that when she runs away, one of her slippers, which is golden by the way and not out of glass like in the Disney version, gets stuck. Then, when the prince has all the girls in the kingdom try it on, and he gets to Cinderella's house, the first stepsister tries it on, but her big toe doesn't fit. So, the mother tells her to cut off her toe, because once she's queen, she won't need to walk anyway. So, she does that, cuts off her toe, the shoe fits, but as the daughter and the prince leave together on his horse, they pass the mother's grave, and there's 2 pigeons sitting on the tree, and they cry, "Rookity-goo, rookity-goo, there's blood in the shoe is too tight, this bride is not right." I remember all of these little rhymes that are part of all of those fairy tales, in German of course, but I think they're just so cute. But yeah, so the prince sees the blood, they turn around, and as the other daughter tries on the shoe, her heel doesn't fit. So the mother tells her to cut off her heel, but the same thing happens as the prince and her leave together. The birds tell him that there's blood in the shoe, and they turn around. The prince then asks the father if there's another daughter in the house, and so Cinderella gets to come out and try on the shoe, and of course it fits perfectly, and as they pass the tree, the birds sing, rookity-goo, no blood's in the shoe's not too tight, this bride is right." But the cruelty still isn't over. While in the Disney version they just get married and it's a happy ending, in the Grimm version the stepsisters actually come to the wedding and try to benefit from this marriage too, but the pigeons punish them by picking both of their eyes out, so the happy ending that I grew up with goes, "And thus, for their wickedness and falsehood, they were punished with blindness as long as they lived." The second fairy tale I want to mention is Snow White, Schneewittchen in German, which Disney adapted in 1937. It was actually Disney's first full-length animated feature film and the first one ever made in the US. And it's still a classic today. But again, I and many other Germans know the original Grimm version a lot better than the Disney version, so here are the biggest differences. The first thing is that the queen, who is Snow White's stepmother, tells her huntsman to kill Snow White because her magic mirror told her that Snow White is now the most beautiful woman in the country. Well, in English they actually translated it to "who is the fairest of them all," which equates beauty with skin tone, which is a whole different topic. But in both versions, the huntsman doesn't actually kill Snow White and tells her to run into the forest instead. In the Disney version, to make the queen believe that Snow White is dead, he brings back a pig's heart, saying that it's Snow White's, while in the Grimm version, it's a wild hog's lungs and liver that he brings back, and thinking that they're Snow White's organs, the queen cooks and eats them. Then Snow White moves in with the 7 dwarfs, and the queen eventually finds out that she's still alive and comes to kill her. In the Disney version, she only needs one try. Dressed up as an old hag, she tricks Snow White into taking a bite from a poisoned apple, which puts her in a sleeping death, knowing that the only way to break the curse is love's first kiss. When the dwarfs come back and find Snow White on the floor, they chase the queen off a cliff so she falls to death, and they put Snow White into a glass coffin and place it in a clearing in the forest. A year later, a prince who had met Snow White before comes by and kisses her, which breaks the curse. She wakes up and her and the prince get married. In the Grimm's version, the queen actually needs 3 tries to kill Snow White. First, she dresses up as a saleswoman and sells Snow White a silk lace. Then she offers to lace her with it, and she ties it up so tightly that Snow White can't breathe anymore, and she leaves her for dead. But when the dwarfs come home, they save her life. So the queen comes back again, and this time wants to sell Snow White a poisoned comb, which she puts into Snow White's hair and goes home thinking that she killed her. But again, the dwarfs save her by taking out the comb, so the queen comes back a 3rd time, this time with a poisoned apple, which is actually supposed to kill her, not just put a curse on her. Snow White takes a bite of it, falls down dead, and the dwarfs don't know how to save her this time, so they put her in the glass coffin, but in this version, it's not a kiss that saves her. A prince comes by and finds her so beautiful laying in the coffin that he asks the dwarfs to take her dead body home with him, which is pretty messed up already, but then while his servants carry the coffin away, they stumble and drop the coffin, which makes the piece of the apple that's stuck in Snow White's throat fall out, and she wakes up. She and the prince get married, of course, but that's not all. They also invite the queen to the wedding and force her to dance in red-hot iron shoes until she drops dead. The end. Okay, so the other 3 ones I'll make a little shorter. Rapunzel, or Rapunzel in English, was actually just recently picked up by Disney as the 2010 computer animated movie Tangled, and they changed the story a lot, so it's actually very different from the Grimm's version. But what I absolutely do remember from the version that I always heard as a child is that a mean sorceress forces Rapunzel's parents to give her to her as soon as she's born, and the old lady locks her up into a tower when she's 12. Instead of stairs or a ladder, the only access to the tower is by climbing up Rapunzel's really long hair. So every day, the old lady says, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, lass dein Haar herunter. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." One time, a prince comes by and hears Rapunzel's beautiful singing, and he watches the sorceress say the phrase and climb up her hair, so he gives it a try himself. He asks her to let down her hair, climbs up to her, and asks her to marry him. They meet every night, and he brings her a piece of silk every time so that she can make a ladder and eventually escape with him. But she gets pregnant, and as the old lady finds out about that, she cuts off her hair and sends her out into the wilderness. She then ties the cut off hair to a hook, and when the prince arrives, she lets it down and the prince climbs up, but when he sees the angry sorceress instead of Rapunzel, he jumps down the tower and falls into thorns that poke out his eyes. I remember that part very clearly, actually. He then wanders around blindly for years, according to the story, until he eventually finds Rapunzel and her twins living in the forest, and as they're finally reunited, she cries and her tears heal the prince's eyes so that he can see again, and they go and live happily ever after in his kingdom. Now let's get to Sleeping Beauty, Dornröschen in German, which Disney made into an animated movie in 1959, and they also made 2 fantasy movies about the evil fairy Maleficent, starring Angelina Jolie in 2014 and 2019. And for this one, the cruel part was actually already taken out in the Grimm's version, so even I, as a kid who grew up in brutally honest German culture, did not get to hear the really dark version, but I do know about it somehow. I must have heard this version sometime later, I think. So the Grimm's version that I grew up with is actually really close to the Disney version. Because she didn't get invited to the ancient version of the baby shower, the evil fairy puts a spell on the unborn princess to prick herself with a spindle when she's 15 and die. However, the spell gets changed into only a deep sleep of 100 years. And that's exactly what happens 15 years later, and everyone in the palace actually falls asleep with the princess. And then on the last day of the 100 years, a prince comes by, finds the princess, the Sleeping Beauty, and just when he kisses her, she wakes up and they get married. Now, the cruel part is from an older Italian version of this fairy tale from the 17th century. So yeah, I guess it's not only the Germans who write those messed up stories. It's called Sun, Moon, and Talia, and in this story, the king, who finds the sleeping princess, actually rapes her, and she gives birth to twins, all while she's asleep. And it gets even more messed up. She eventually wakes up because one of the babies sucks the flax in this version out of her finger. So she's back awake and raises her twins. And one day the king comes back, tells her who he is, they bond, but then he has to leave again because he's married. His wife finds out about the princess and the twins and gets so jealous that she tries to have the kids killed and wants to serve them as dinner to the king. But the cook actually saves the kids and serves lamb instead. And the queen also tries to burn the princess. But in the end, she actually gets burnt herself and the king marries the princess. Fairy tales are really messed up sometimes. And the last one on my list is the Frog Prince, or Froschkönig in German. This one wasn't actually made into a Disney movie until 2009, but the story has been popular way before that, even in the US. I'm not quite sure how people know this fairy tale though. Like, do you guys read one of the many book versions, or is it just a trope that has become part of pop culture? Anyway, as you probably know, it has to do with a princess kissing a frog, which makes the frog turn into a handsome prince. Well, that's not the version I grew up with. In the Grimm version, the princess actually doesn't have the best personality traits at first, and she would never kiss the frog. Instead, this is what happens. While walking around and playing with her golden ball, the princess accidentally drops it into a fountain. A frog offers to help her and get it back for her if she takes him home and makes him her companion and friend. She agrees to that, but once she has her ball back, she just leaves the frog behind. He follows her though, and her father, the king, forces her to keep her promise, even though she's scared and disgusted with the frog. So the frog gets to sit at the table with her and gets to come to her room. But when he wants to sleep in the bed with her, she gets so angry that she throws him against the wall, and that's how he turns into the prince. And they get married for whatever reason. Okay, so these were the fairy tale versions that I grew up with in Germany, and now I want to know what shocked you the most, or which parts of these stories you were actually familiar with. And I'm also interested in how popular the Grimm's fairy tales are in the US nowadays. Like, do any of you have a Grimm's book at home? Let me know in the comments below. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit the thumbs up button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for free if you enjoy my content. You can also follow me on Instagram. It's @_. And if you want to, you can become a patron on Patreon to get access to some more behind the scenes content and live Q&A sessions with me, and just support my channel even more. And with that, I hope that you're all being safe, and I hope I'll see you next time. Tschüss!